All right, good afternoon, New Bedford Guide, New Bedford Live followers. I hope everyone's staying safe out there. A little bit of bad weather. Be careful if you hit the roads. I've heard of power outages already, but we're here to talk a very important program in the city of New Bedford. The program we're going to talk about today is the New Bedford Child and Family Services Emergency Services Co-Response Program that they partner with the New Bedford Police Department. It's something that's been going on for a while now. Joining me today from Child and Family Services is Pam Bolorino. She's the Program Service Emergency Services Director. Matthew Boyd, he's Emergency Services Mobile Crisis Manager. Isabel Burgett, she is the Emergency Services Co-Response Clinician. And New Bedford Police Department Captain Derek Belong, he's the District Commander North End Police Department. So welcome everyone. Hope everyone's being safe over there.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. So I've heard about this program, but we want to there's going to be an audience out there that really doesn't know about it. So Pam, I guess we'll start with you. What's the program all about?
Yeah, so we started this in September of 2019. And ultimately the way it developed was that the previous chief had talked about wanting a clinician to be part of the police department. And since we are the emergency service team for this district, and we are the contract for the state to do emergency evals, I offered to give up one of our clinicians to really start this program out. So we initially started with one of our old timers, Jake, who since moved on, but really just molded the program to what it is now. So what we do is we have a clinician that will go out with an officer, and Captain Belong can talk a little bit more about that. And they ride along all day with that officer. And the goal is to respond to any kind of mental health calls with the ultimate goal of stabilizing the individual and providing them the assistance that they need. And ultimately trying to avoid patients having to go to the emergency room that don't necessarily need to, but at the same time, being an intervention and assisting them in the community. We've started, like I said, September of 2019. We have seen 410 patients since then. So we have a really good, and we have great outcomes that I can talk about a little bit later.
Well, tell me, what is a mental health kind of crisis? Is this like, I've heard of programs where someone overdoses. Is this just mental health, or is this also with the overdoses?
So it tends to be and Isabel can talk a little bit about the kinds of patients she encounters, but it tends to be a dual a lot of times.
Yeah.
You want to elaborate, Isabel?
Yeah. So a lot of the times it is mental health, but sometimes it is those who, struggle with addiction or overdoses. I've definitely spoken with people, post OD, and even sort of set them up with services and follow up after the evaluation too.
Yeah, I'm putting the information on the screen. So we had talked before. So that if someone is going through any kind of crisis out there in the city of New Bedford, 508-996-3154. It's a 24/7 operation. Is someone going to pick up if we call this, or is this something that they record?
They better. Yeah, we don't close. We're not allowed to close. We're 24/7. We are an emergency service program, which means that we are open at all times. And although we're talking about New Bedford, our emergency service program covers Dartmouth all the way to Hanson, Mass. So the main call center is in New Bedford, but we have a satellite office in Plymouth as well. But our core response program, really the one that's like up and running and doing amazing, is in New Bedford.
Okay, so if someone calls this number, they can, if they're kind of in the South Coast, is that how it works?
Yeah. It's basically like we sometimes get a call, like Dartmouth Police will call us as well. And we respond out with Dartmouth Police as well. So as long as somebody's calling this number, we will assist them and somebody will always pick up.
So I'm going to bring in New Bedford Police Department. So we'll bring in the captain. So Captain, just tell me how does the police get involved in this program, as far as is something that you guys started or something they started, or you guys partnered together?
All right, Mike, thank you. So originally this started with Chief Cadero and Pam and Wendy, who was one of the directors at the center where they work. They got together and thought about how can we bring some of these services to, the scene where the officers are going, during their routine patrols. Now with Chief Oliveira and Deputy Chief Souza in support of this, what happens is traditionally police officers have a skill set that we're trained to do. And often they respond to calls for service where somebody is, responding to internal stimuli, having a change in their mental health. And they may need services that go beyond what a police officer can give them on scene. And often we have to then bring that person either by police cruiser or ambulance to either the crisis center or to St. Luke's, tying up resources or maybe a bed at the hospital. This program brings the clinician to the patient themselves and allows the clinician, who's much more trained, obviously, than a police officer maybe, to do an evaluation on site and either bring them for services or deem that they're safe enough to remain on site and not in need of services, tying up a bed at St. Luke's or taking up space in the crisis center where they may not need, necessarily services in the moment. So it's very extremely helpful for resources. And again, with Isabel, who does an amazing job with the police, you're just adding more tools to that first response when folks are responding to scenes where patients are in need of services.
Yeah, the program sounds amazing because I think if someone calls a number and they're having a mental health crisis, they might feel like they're automatically be taken away and evaluated. But this gives that option to potentially resolve the problem, give the resources to someone who might be going through it, and kind of go from there. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you always talk about the tools on a police officer's belt, and, the most important tool that we always tell the children is our words. How do we communicate? But sometimes we don't have the tools needed to handle certain calls for service. And that's where, a clinician like Isabel or Pam or Matt or anyone that responds comes in and they take it to the next place where they can meet that person where they're at and really be able to give them, some of those critical needs in the moment and help them in a way that a police officer may just not be educated on how to do so.
Yeah. So let me go ahead and bring in Matthew. So Matthew, what's the goals of the program? You're the Emergency Services Mobile Crisis Manager. What's the goals that you could give us?
So the goals of the program really are around diversion. So our goal is always to keep individuals in the community. We know that the best treatment that can be provided to an individual happens in the community, whether that is a child who is in need of services or an adult who is in need of services. We know, and research shows, that when we meet people where they are at, both in terms of their mental ability and their physical ability, we are able to provide them with a much greater service. So our goal is always around diversion, keeping folks out of hospitalization, keeping folks home where they will essentially flourish.
Yeah, I don't know who wants to jump on this, but when you talk about the stats, can you just talk about what's at all those stats, what's the most common phone call that people are doing?
So I would say that majority of the calls that we're going out on is somebody suffering from a mental illness, whether they're making suicidal statements or homicidal statements, but it's truly somebody who is suffering from mental health, and they could have a component of substance abuse as well. But the main reason really is the mental health piece of it, right? So they could have had, a verbal altercation with a family member, but ultimately that verbal altercation was a result of somebody being off their medications, right? Or it could be somebody who recently lost their job and has lost the other things, like going through a divorce, lost their children, lost their job, and they're feeling hopeless and helpless. And, we come in there, and the goal for the clinician is to say, okay, we see you, we hear you, and we're here with an officer, but we're here as a team to help you. And we're not here to cause any harm. And I think that goes a long way for folks. One of the biggest takeaways from the stats that I think people should know is we've had 410 calls. We've only had 4 people arrested out of those 410 calls. And that's because they had active warrants that there was nothing we could do about it. And only twice did an officer have to go hands-on because the person was so violent that they had no choice. That is significant, because I believe if we looked at stats prior to us, really partnering up, I have a feeling the stats would look a lot different. And I think initially there's always the okay, the clinicians meet, going out with an officer. What does that mean for the officer, right? It means you're a team and you're going out to really provide the best for a patient that you can. And I think, officers have been really receptive to this. I think Derek can go a little further into, I think they trust us, and I think that they know we're there to assist and provide the best outcomes. And the other piece that I do want to talk about statistics is that, I think a big piece of this has to do with this program as well, but I haven't really dug into it too much. New Bedford has one of the best statistics in the state of Massachusetts from diverting patients in the emergency room and emergency room borders. So there's a lot of talk out there right now that emergency rooms are really just overwhelmed, and they're overwhelmed with mental health patients, right? So, St. Luke's is a very, very busy emergency room, but we work so closely with our police department, with our emergency rooms, that we only have 11% boarders in the emergency room. The next city over is 24% and up. So that speaks volumes. And I think this program is a significant part of it because of the diverting that Isabel and the officers are doing.
Yeah. So, Captain DeLong, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think to Pam's point, right? So the relationship that the officers and the clinician Isabel build, it's like any other friendship or when you meet somebody new, it takes time to build that trust. Once the clinician begins to go on rides with officers that work, Isabel is mainly on the day shift, so she sees most of the day officers. She works out of the North End precinct, so she normally rides around with daytime North End officers, but they respond to calls all over the city when a clinician is called, and she builds relationships individually with each one of those officers that may be, different depending on their personality. But the main thing is once they go to these calls and they recognize her skill set and see how much of a help she can be. When I talk to my staff, they always rave about her ability to communicate with folks. She does a phenomenal job with juveniles, talking to juveniles in a way that really meets them at their level. Being able to sometimes section on scene instead of having to bring them to the hospital or crisis, and also not having to section on scene and recognizing that she can set up a treatment plan right there and then for that person, and then do follow-up the next day or 48 hours later to say, hey Derek, how are you feeling today? You doing good? And the valuable resources that are saved with that, and you're really giving that person the right tools so that they can be successful in their lives, right? Instead of having an officer where they're going to say, okay, you need help, get my cruiser, I'm going to bring you to the hospital. We're not doing that. We're trying to think outside the box and go, okay, let's bring a clinician here and say, well, you need help, so let's figure out what will be best for you so that you can feel better.
Yeah, it sounds like this program is a nice alternative to someone going through a mental health crisis from calling 911, which might get a different response from the police, as opposed to calling this number and get a more softer response. Is that fair?
Yeah, and a lot of the calls start with 911. It'll be a significant other or a parent or a sibling. My mom, my brother, my husband, my wife, something's wrong, something's not right. They're going crazy. They're breaking things. They've had a change of mental status. We need help. I'm not sure what to do. And now when the police officer and Isabel show up as a team, like Pam mentioned, they figure out what's best for that person, keeps them safe. Arrest isn't always the best option. A lot of times they need help that we can't provide as police officers. And that's where Child and Family Services and this great program really come in to help. And my staff absolutely love having her. She's a resource that, it means a lot to us. They work well together. And I'm very proud of the program, just like I know Matt and Pam are. This has been a great success for us.
Yeah, I can't imagine going through a mental health crisis and then being forced to be put into jail or something like that and just making it worse, right? So this is something that gets that softer response and potentially, and I have to imagine that with Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's coming around, this is going to be this is something that's very much needed during the holidays. So I'm guessing the call volume spikes up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. It's actually interesting. The holidays, people always think we get like an abundance of calls, but believe it or not, during Christmas, volume does go down. And I think a lot of it's like family members are feeling, sympathetic towards their loved ones and take them in for the holiday. But then the numbers spike right up right after the holiday is over. So it does fluctuate. We're very busy right now. I'm not going to take away from that. We're extremely busy. I think another takeaway from this program that a lot of people don't realize is the state as a whole, every district has their own emergency service team that is set up by the state. So we're the emergency service team, right? And what happens is when we weren't involved in this program, say, the officer saw the patient and somebody from a different agency was involved in the call and they send the patient to the emergency room, we still have to go back into the emergency room and see that patient again. So this actually prevents somebody from going in through like multiple evaluations because the eval has to get done through us. So it's, so this way, the evaluation's already done. So if somebody does require inpatient level of care, there's a great process that happens, which means Isabel does the evaluation, the officer and Isabel transport the patient to the hospital. They actually do a warm handoff. So what that means is they talk to the physician, they talk to the nurse, they say, here's what's going on. The patient's already been seen, evaluation is done, they're going inpatient, and our team back at the office is already starting the process of identifying an inpatient psychiatric facility for that patient. So the length of stay in the emergency room decreases significantly because the process has already started. So that's another huge benefit to having this program.
So Isabel, you're based on your job title as a response clinician, it sounds like you're one of the foot soldiers that would show up with the police officers, right? So what's in your view, what has the experience benefited people who are in a crisis?
I think that, like, first, people are very comfortable speaking with me, even, you know, first as an officer. To me, like, I'm plain clothes, so I'm clearly like a civilian. People are very open and honest with me generally during like a crisis. And again, I can sort of assess for safety, make sure they can be safe in the community, and do follow up like as appropriate, if they can be. And if not, we can sort of, like Pam said, sort of streamline the process, getting them to the hospital, sort of, you know, telling them about the process and what's going on so that they're aware, you know, of the process of there being an inpatient bed search, and like making the transition from the community to the hospital pretty smooth.
Yeah, if you're at home watching, you know, put that number down. It's very important. There's a lot of services in the community. There's like I think the Shriners and other folks have these phone calls you can call, but there's a good one if you're in the South Coast to really have on speed dial or somewhere on your fridge, just in case, especially if you're having maybe a older teenager having issues or those kind of things that you just want to have access to some resource that, you know, is at your fingertips. Instead of calling 911, this might be the better way to go if it's not an emergency. So we'll just kind of wrap up. So anything anyone wants to close with as we close out?
No, I don't think I have anything additional.
All right. Well, it's an important program. Share this video, please. If you're watching this, share it. It's the holidays, so people do go through certain depressions. And as they stated, you know, after the holidays, it's going to pick up. So if you have someone that you know has had mental health issues, we just had Veterans Day. You know, 22 veterans commit suicide every single day. If you know a veteran might be having some trouble, give them this number. There's a lot of great resources out there. So you're not alone. There's services out there. Police officers are your friend. Let them come with someone like one of these friendly faces here you see on the screen and help someone out. So appreciate your time, NBPD and the Department of Family Services, Child Family Services.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much.